I'm Ananda Bosman, and I'm greatly delighted to be present here at this conference in Canada, thanks to Jan's great work. This is pioneering work. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the press. For the last 33 years, we have been engaging with the UFO phenomenon in all of its different facets. These have been witnessed by other people. In the last few years, we've been specifically gaining documentary methodologies by which the experience can be catalogued and can be recorded with equipment. This summer, in July, we used absolutely brand new equipment with electrophotonic measurements of the ambience of the environment. And we will be presenting that data in regards to using consciousness to engage or interact with the phenomena. We would go high to the Swiss Alps with a group of, let's say, 30 people or more, and we would engage specific protocols of coherence that are documented in the scientific fields of biofeedback. So this is the hemisynchronization of the brain at 8 cycles per second, cardio rhythm harmonics that one has in compassionate states that are measured to produce magnetic fields that are in the golden proportion. So you have that measure of a biological coherence, a consciousness intent, a protocol, engaging and calling the cosmic other, whatever it may be. We do not subscribe to the ETI hypothesis ourselves, but it's there. They're absolutely real, and this has been also demonstrated, apart from the Sturrock report, which was a fantastic research effort. You've got the Cometa study, and you have, in 2010, the CNN press conference by Robert Hastings, with the signed affidavits of 120 nuclear missile operators who testify that UFOs would switch off our nuclear missiles, our ICBMs, in different continents, which is highly significant and is at the clearest of intent. So we've had successful results as a civilian effort done by civilians. It had to be civilians in Switzerland, in Austria, in Italy. And we'll be presenting some of that data. The UFO responds to the coherent signals that are measured by biofeedback. It produces an alphabet of activities. The artistic approach is that our reality is ever more being popularized as a computer simulation. The popularist is Elon Musk from Tesla Motors, but you have Dr. Eric Tyrrell of NASA, who found the moons, some of the moons of Uranus and Jupiter, who very much believes in the evidence pointing towards a simulation, and Dr. Nick Bostrom of Sweden. So there is more and more a movement towards and findings towards this being some form of simulation. I don't believe in that hypothesis, but I think it's useful in terms of the UFO. In this hypothesis, the so-called simulation hypothesis, artificial reality, even fake reality, the UFO could be seen as derivatives from us, from our great-great-grandchildren, whose computer power processing has gone beyond simulating the single molecule that we are able to simulate now to simulating a whole world, and then being able to take that into space and time. It's a few hundred years, perhaps 1,000 years, if you backtrack Moore's law. I think it's more complex than that, and the ultra-terrestrial hypothesis is also not enough. Clearly, consciousness is involved. Consciousness as an ontological foundation. The UFO phenomena pushes our barriers in every way. You get absurdities. You get, every time, different forms of experiences that push our boundaries, but also bring us, when we interact with consciousness, to our own foundation of coherence, very clearly evident. The most creative artistic fields that are measured in the brain are the ones that engage the UFO. And this is clearly evident also in the scientific studies at Hessdalen in Norway, which we will also present and which we engage as well. So the canvas becomes the environment. The artist is consciousness with biological coherence with other artists that interact on the canvas of reality. That is the artistic approach. We're semantic artists, musicologists, founders of the 432 Hertz postmodern popular music, which we will utilize also in cultural attempts for contact. So using harmonics of music, including the alpha 8 Hertz and 432 Hertz, and tempos of the heart in compassion, to engage culturally this intelligence, this UFO intelligence. This is something we're aiming towards. We are also eschatologically driven, so we like to look at the ultimate meaning of it without becoming caught in it. In our work with Dialogues in the Cosmos with European civilian units, we are gathering every possible signal data line, and we're not drawing assumptions. We're just getting the data sources, and there are many data sources that come in when this phenomenon is triggered. And we take as much as we can. We will delineate that this afternoon. Thank you. I would like to contribute the new physics of hadronic mechanics, which is also made by a contactee, Dr. Ruggiero Santilli, who has reinvented mathematics. He's basically created many new levels of mathematics that unify all mathematics, and that can actually calculate the parameter of the proton within the hadronic horizon, and has done so correctly. And furthermore has made a practical new technology from that, whereby lightning is simulated, because all science before, including the old new physics, quantum mechanics, which is 1936 years old physics, very old physics, does not deal with true objectivity. And true objectivity is the outer problem. All physicists work with the outer problem and the inner problem. Like lightning, that's an inner problem, an atmospheric phenomenon of the ionosphere to the Earth. So he was able to calculate how to simulate lightning and made a plasma arc flow reactor in 1998, by which you can put through waste oil or sewage, and you produce a gas that you inject in cars that is clean. Furthermore, since the Americas now have abundantly new oil emerging, the fossil fuels need to be clean. When the fossil fuels are put through the plasma arc flow reactor, you have a gas that is so clean that the byproduct is oxygen and nitrogen, and 5,000 times more energy. In 1968, Dr. Ruggiero Santilli was in Italy with his family, and they saw a UFO approach them. He went into the UFO. Time and space warped. The astronomical signs were not where they were supposed to be. From that experience, having been at Harvard and having been at the University of Torino, he developed his new hypertopic mathematics, genotopic mathematics, which shows that biological life is invariant for the first time and is a time machine. We will go into that because this has been demonstrated by Dr. Chris Illert in 1990 with primitive conch shell morphologies, which were simulated in computers. The only way to compute them was not with Euclidean mathematics, the old mathematics, or the Platonic forms, but with the isoforms and the genotopic holographic forms. The implications of being able to model primitive life through 6 arrows of time, 6 dimensions of time, and with complex human beings needing 8 arrows of time at the least to be animate, not static, not quantized to a single quanta, because we are living, we are breathing. There are millions of reactions, billions of reactions going through our bodies right now, not individual quantas. In the DNA alone, you have a symmetry that does not break under 4. So this is 4 quantum. You can't deal with quantum mechanics. You can deal with crystals and metals with quantum mechanics. So this new physics is tremendously exciting. This new physics has made telescopes that can see antimatter UFOs and isomatter UFOs. And these are being observed, as well as antimatter asteroids and other objects. So the implications of what our reality is fundamentally changed by this new physics, hadronic mechanics. I know many colleagues in the fields. They're pioneering hypergenetics. The DNA is not as we've been told it. It is a medicinal field. It's a corporate science field, not religious science per se. It is a practical, hands-on science. U.S. naval intelligence uses the Magna gas flame, which is an iso superconductor. Superconductors are always very cold. These are superconductors at body temperature and much higher temperatures, which changes everything. U.S. naval intelligence uses this flame because it's clean. It doesn't leave a mess. It goes through steel much quicker. The odd thing is that the human hand can pass straight through it and not be cut. So we will go into this tremendously important field of hadronic physics, which changes the nature of who we are, where consciousness is derived in every moment, and hadronic space-time machines, which have been patented and which will be made of the new material that has been practically made, these iso superconducting materials.
Voyez-vous des moments comme ça?
Well, with the contactees of the 1950s, what is interesting is that you have the Giant Rock Air Force Base, which was bought by a Howard Hughes operator, George Van Tassel. Now, the Canadian government's Project Magnet, headed by Wilbert B. Smith, was primarily focusing on receiving information from the UFOs in different forms. And this was part of the official project. And he also used radio ham operators, he used telepaths, he used physical contactees like Dr. Arthur Matthews, who was Dr. Nikola Tesla's protege, who had physical contact from 1942 to 1962 and has over 70 different scientific patents behind him. He made the vacuum tube technology of Tesla, he completed it, by which Dr. Tesla claimed to have contact from Venus and from Mars. Now, Wilbert B. Smith put out a questionnaire through Canada and the USA, through the contactee movements, and the ones that gave the same replies were genuine. And amidst those were George Adamski and George Van Tassel. So these were sources of information for Wilbert B. Smith. George Van Tassel had 10,000 people gathered at the Giant Rock base near Joshua Tree. This is before the age of the satellite. Objects would come in the sky, they would beam them with their headlights, they would take out extra strong spotlights, pulse 2 times, and the objects would respond. This is what we are getting in Switzerland today in our dialogues. Or they would change direction, or they would stop, they would jump, before satellites, going from 1952 to 1957. Furthermore, George Van Tassel received a communication which said that the UFOs would fly over the White House in July. He wrote that communication as instructed to the President Truman of the United States. As the UFOs flew over the White House, July 26th, the letter was opened. Instructions were given by these intelligences months earlier, saying don't fly in from the east side, there will be a catastrophe. They followed those instructions as the air pilots went in to try and intercept The stamp from Truman's office was returned to Van Tassel. It correlated to the time of the flyover. So you have these kind of correlations to the contactees. A lot of absurdities, a lot of fakes, but even some of the fake phenomena has a message going through it. Like the crop circle research, which shows that 70% is in fact fake. They're artists. Artists who receive in dreams the idea of the crop circle. And when they go and make the art, the crop art, they get inspiration, they experience sounds, they experience spheres. Colin Andrews, who did this research, found that all crop circles aligned fake and real ones into a giant crop circle with exact indicators to each other. A macro crop circle made from fake and real crop circles. This is how we are being pulled through our confines of what we think is going on. There is something that is artistic, that is dynamic, that involves our creativity. The Haunebu material came from Maria Orsic, who was the remote viewer before World War II of the Rill Gesellschaft. I met members of the Rill Society and I know the head of the Black Sun Society today. She was a tremendously talented remote viewer who had communication, she claimed, from Aldebaran and received the Hanbu design, the Rill designs. And the Hanbu design, the Boat of Ra, does look very similar to that of George Adamski and other contactees.
Okay, thank you very much. Next question.
My question is for Mr. Donderi and Ananda Bosman. What do you think about the United States administration who make Air Force Space Command in the last few months? Mr. Trump advised they will create it. So what do you think about that? And the only video they show from the army chasing a UFO. That is too official information told by Mr. Trump about that. Not the video, but the Air Force Space Command.
Well, Alexander Ryukov, who first came out, was of course counterintelligence, and we have seen a lot of counterintel coming out from the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, Richard Doty, and the Professor Benevit's case, which kind of introduced the reptoid idea, but was counterintelligence. So I think there is a dribbling out occurring here, but this is anything but anything near full disclosure. I think the effort that was done by Stephen Bassett, the citizens' hearings on disclosure, gave a very good format for what should happen and should happen in Senate and Congress hearings. With President Trump, whose seat appears to be really, insofar, independent from the military-industrial complex that Eisenhower warned about at his retirement when he had brought in Nelson Rockefeller into the special group to do with the research on UFOs in 1954. The special group is now documented in the JFK documents that President Trump released, mentioning the special group and Dr. Henry Kissinger in regards to it, and several of the other big names, I think Zbigniew Brzezinski, who also created the Trilateral Commission, which, of course, the Honorable Paul Hellyer, the former defense minister, warned about in the citizens' hearing. The phenomenon of the UFOs, we've had very close contacts, and also with others, extremely close. I won't go into detail, but it has convinced me that the intelligence behind is able to form reality, what we call reality synthesize. And in fact, in the academic studies from Harvard, we do have the work of Professor Mack, John Mack, who was given the abductees from the artist Bud Hopkins and Dr. David Jacobs, who were talking about implants, very traumatic abductions. But he introduced transpersonal psychology in the methodology of dealing with the abduction experience, kind of meditation that is coherently in training. And he would help them deal with their psychological or spiritual crisis. And when they dealt with that spiritual crisis, and they had the next so-called abduction, the entities changed, the ship changed, but they experienced the entities as the same beings, but a different form. And that would continue to change as the person went through their transpersonal psychology, transformations, and in dealing with each level of spiritual crisis. So this is not to say that it's all psychological. Mack thought this was an intelligence that works omni-objectively with the subjective and the objective and forms it and adjusts it. And I think this is very significant. With Betty and Barney Hill, mentioned earlier, the physical evidence that came there was the hydrocarbons on her clothing. Hydrocarbons are also a product that are made by hadronic plasma arc flow reactors that produce the forms of isosuperconductivity. So I find that particularly interesting, that facet. The way that the Hills were intercepted by a trained psychological warfare hypnotherapist under Eisenhower with suggestions is the abduction of the abduction. So we have to become stringently aware of every level of experience. I generally recommend to people who have a memory of an experience, work it out for yourself. Learn self-hypnosis or meditation or transpersonal psychology. Don't get abducted by the hypnotherapist.
Merci beaucoup.
Vous avez bien compris.